While walking in the halls, someone pushed me and said, "Aren't your shoes part of the Kitty Crew?" What are you talking about? I'm not part of a freaky gang. I had no idea who the Kitty Crew was, or why anyone would think I, of people, was part of it. The guy looked down at my feet and shook his head. "Not with those shoes on. You gotta take those kicks off immediately. Those mean something around here." "What? What's wrong with my shoes?" He just walked away, leaving me confused in the hallway. I made it to art class thinking maybe that guy was just messing with freshmen. But when I sat down, Mrs. Cook stopped mid-sentence and stared at my feet. "Young man, do you really think it's appropriate to wear those shoes?" Her voice had that teacher tone that meant I was in trouble. "I really don't know what you're talking about." I was getting frustrated now because nobody would explain what was happening. The girls sitting behind me started giggling and taking pictures of my shoes with their phones. I could hear them whispering but couldn't make out what they were saying. One of them leaned forward and tapped my shoulder. "You're either really brave or really stupid," she said, before going back to her phone. Throughout the entire class, people kept staring at my feet. When I got up to sharpen my pencil, everyone went silent like they were waiting for something to happen. Mrs. Cook kept glancing at my shoes nervously like they might explode. By the time the bell rang, I was paranoid and confused. In the hallway between classes, it got worse. Kids would see me coming and move to the other side of the hall. A group of sophomores pointed, and one of them made a slashing their neck motion across his throat. My locker neighbor, who usually said hi every day, grabbed his stuff and practically ran away when he saw me. By lunch, my phone was blowing up with Snapchat notifications. People had posted pictures of my shoes all over their stories, with crying emojis and comments I didn't understand. "RIP, and he doesn't know, and someone tell him before it's too late." I sat alone at lunch because nobody would come near my table. Even the lunch ladies gave me weird looks when I went through the line. One of them actually blessed herself like she was warding off evil. I tried to eat my sandwich, but my appetite was gone. What was so wrong with my shoes? In chemistry class, my lab partner asked to switch seats. The teacher agreed without even asking why. So I did the experiment alone while everyone whispered and stared. Someone had written, "brave or stupid" on the board with an arrow pointing to my seat. During passing period, I saw a memorial plaque on the wall I'd never noticed before. Someone said the name Matthew, and I tried Googling it on my phone, but the school Wi-Fi blocked all the results. The few snippets I could see mentioned tragic incident and gang violence, but nothing specific. My hands were shaking as I walked to gym class. During gym class, I thought things would be normal since we all had to wear the same uniform sneakers. But Coach Wiley blew his whistle as soon as I walked in and pointed at me. "You, step outside in the hall, now." I followed him out while the rest of the class stared. Some kids looked sorry for me. Others looked like they were witnessing a dead man walking. Coach Wiley was usually pretty chill, but his face was serious. "Son, I don't know who told you it was okay to wear those after what happened to poor Matthew Carney." I asked him, "What happened to Matthew Carney?" Coach Wiley took this deep breath and looked down the hallway both ways, like he was checking if anyone else was around to hear us. His voice got real quiet when he started talking, and I had to lean in closer to hear him. Matthew was a sophomore last year. Good kid, never caused any trouble. His jaw got all tight like this was harder to talk about than I thought it would be. He got caught up in something bad, something that wasn't even his fault. Coach kept looking around while he talked, and I could tell he was nervous about even saying this stuff out loud. The thing is, Matthew wasn't in any gang, never wanted to be in one either. He rubbed his face with his hand, and I noticed his eyes looked different, almost sad. But he wore those same shoes you got on right now to the school one day, just liked how they looked, I guess. Coach pointed at my feet and shook his head. Some kids from the Kitty Crew saw him wearing them and thought he was claiming their territory or disrespecting them somehow. His eyes got this weird, distant look like he was seeing the whole thing happen again in his head. They didn't care that he didn't know what the shoes meant. I asked him what exactly happened to Matthew, but Coach just shook his head real hard. "That's not my story to tell, son, but you need to understand those shoes are like wearing a target on your back around here." Right then the bell rang super loud and made me jump. "You need to go straight to the office right now. Don't stop at your locker. Don't talk to anyone. Just go." He put his hand on my shoulder and pushed me toward the main hallway. I walked to the office with my heart beating so fast, I thought everyone could hear it. The assistant principal was already standing there waiting for me when I got there, like someone had called ahead to tell her I was coming. She had this super tight expression on her face and looked at my feet right away. "Take those shoes off immediately and put them in this bag." She was holding this clear plastic bag out to me. I bent down and started untying my shoes while she watched with her arms crossed. My hands were shaking, so bad I could barely get the laces undone. Standing there in just my socks on the cold office floor made me feel completely stupid and small. She turned around and pulled out these old gym shoes from a cabinet behind her desk. "Put these on." The shoes smelled like old cheese and feet mixed together, and I tried not to gag when I slipped them on. They were too big and made this gross squishing sound when I walked. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for gang-affiliated clothing after what happened last year." She sat down at her desk and started typing something on her computer. "This is for everyone's safety, including yours." I wanted to ask more questions, but she held up her hand to stop me. "You can go back to class now, and I don't want to see you wearing those other shoes on the school property again." Walking back to class in those nasty loner shoes was the worst walk of my life. Everyone in the hallway stopped and stared at me, and I could hear the whispers starting up again. Some kids took pictures with their phones, and I heard someone say something about Matthew in a bus stop, but I couldn't catch all of it. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket, but I was too scared to look at it. When I got to my next class, everyone turned to look at me walk in, and the teacher stopped talking mid-sentence. I sat down and tried to act normal, but kids kept turning around to look at my feet. The rest of the day went by in this weird blur where I just wanted to disappear. After school, I finally pulled out my phone and saw I had like 50 new messages. Most of them were from numbers I didn't even recognize, warning me to stay away from certain streets. Someone had sent me a news article from last year, but when I clicked on it, there was a paywall blocking most of it. All I could see was the headline that said something about a teen tragedy and gang retaliation. My hands were shaking again as I walked home, taking a different route than usual because of the warnings. At home, I went straight to my room and opened my laptop to search for more information about Matthew. Most of the results were blocked, or the pages had been taken down, but I kept trying different search terms. Finally, I found this fundraising page his family had made, and my stomach dropped when I saw it. The comments were all turned off, but the description talked about medical bills and a long recovery that didn't work out in the end. There was a picture of Matthew smiling in a basketball uniform, and he looked like any normal kid. My mom got home and called me downstairs because the school had left her a voicemail about the shoe incident. She looked confused and worried at the same time. "What's this about you wearing gang shoes to the school?" I tried to explain, but realized I didn't even understand it myself. I didn't know they meant anything. I just bought them because I liked them. She made me promise to wear different shoes tomorrow and to stay out of trouble, but I could tell she was scared too. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about Matthew and wondering if he felt this same confusion and fear when people first started acting weird about his shoes. Every time a car drove by outside, I jumped up to check the window, paranoid that wearing those shoes for just one day might have already marked me as a target. My heart raced every time I heard any noise outside, and I kept checking the locks on my bedroom door. The next morning, my alarm went off, and I dragged myself out of bed after maybe 2 hours of sleep total. I grabbed the most boring white sneakers from my closet and stared at them for a minute before putting them on. My mom made breakfast, but I couldn't eat much because my stomach was still in knots from yesterday. At the school, I walked through the front doors and immediately noticed people looking at my feet first, before looking at my face. Some kid I'd never seen before actually walked right up to me in the hallway and bent down to check my shoes. He looked at them for a few seconds, then nodded and walked away without saying a word. It was like everyone was on edge watching for those specific shoes to show up again. During first period, my teacher was taking attendance when the phone rang, and she picked it up. She looked right at me and said the assistant principal wanted to see me in her office immediately. I grabbed my stuff and walked down the empty hallway, feeling that same paranoia from yesterday creeping back. Something's really off about how everyone knows exactly what these shoes mean except our main character here. The way that coach got all quiet and nervous talking about Matthew makes me wonder what details he's leaving out on purpose. The assistant principal was sitting at her desk when I got there, but there was another woman in the room too. She introduced herself as Amelie Hong and said she was a grief counselor who worked with the district. They both had these serious expressions and kept looking at each other like they were having a conversation without words. Amelie asked if I was processing everything okay from yesterday and if anyone had threatened me or made me feel unsafe. I mentioned how that sophomore had made the throat-slashing gesture across his neck, and both women exchanged this worried look. The assistant principal picked up her phone and made a quick call while Amelie kept asking me questions about how I was feeling. After she hung up, the assistant principal told me they were assigning a security guard to walk me between classes for the rest of the week, just to be safe. I tried to tell them it wasn't necessary, but they weren't really asking for my opinion. When the bell rang, a security guard was already waiting outside the office for me. He was this huge guy who looked like he could bench press a car, and everyone in the hallway stopped to stare as he walked behind me to my next class. Having him follow me around made everything so much worse because now I looked like either a snitch who'd told on someone or someone in actual danger who needed protection. Kids moved even further away from me in the hallways, and nobody would make eye contact. At lunch, I sat at my usual table, but it stayed completely empty while the guard stood about 10 feet away watching everything. The cafeteria was packed, but there was this bubble of empty space around me like I had some contagious disease. I ate my sandwich alone while everyone whispered and pointed at the security guard standing there with his arms crossed. The isolation was suffocating, and I just wanted to disappear. After lunch, I had art class, and when I walked in, Mrs. Cook looked up and saw the security guard wait outside the door. She came over to my desk and quietly asked if she could talk to me for a second. We stepped into the corner of the room where no one could hear us. "I need to apologize for how I reacted yesterday," she said, and her voice was shaking a little. She told me Matthew had been in her class too, and seeing those shoes brought back terrible memories she wasn't prepared for. Her eyes got watery, and she quickly walked back to her desk before anyone noticed. The rest of art class went by without anyone talking to me, and the security guard was still waiting when the bell rang. After school, I told the guard I was going to the library to do homework, and he followed me there but waited outside. I was walking through the stacks looking for a book when this kid I didn't recognize stepped out from behind a shelf. He said his name was Elliot Schwartz and that Matthew had been his brother's best friend. He looked tired and older than a high school kid should look. Elliot said his brother was there when everything happened and hadn't been the same since. "Do you want to know what really went down?" he asked me. I nodded because I needed to understand why everyone was so scared. We walked outside to the bleachers where nobody could overhear us and sat down on the cold metal seats. Elliot pulled out his phone and started scrolling through photos. He showed me pictures of Matthew from before everything happened. Just a normal kid wearing regular clothes and smiling at the camera. Matthew looked like he could have been anyone at our school. Elliot explained that last year, Matthew had bought those exact same shoes I wore yesterday because he thought they looked cool. He didn't know they meant anything to anyone and wore them to the school for weeks without any problems. Then one day, some actual members of the kiddie crew saw him at the bus stop after school. They thought he was from a rival gang trying to move into their territory and claim their streets. The confrontation started with them yelling at Matthew and demanding to know who he was with. Matthew tried to explain he didn't know what they were talking about and that he just liked the shoes. They didn't believe him and thought he was disrespecting them by lying to their faces. Elliot's brother tried to step in and explain that Matthew wasn't in any gang, but one of them pushed him so hard he fell backwards onto the concrete. Matthew got jumped by 4 guys, while about 20 other students just stood there watching. Everyone was too scared to help or get involved because they didn't want to become targets too. Someone finally called 911, but it took the cops and ambulance almost 15 minutes to show up. By then, Matthew had serious head injuries from getting his head slammed into the sidewalk over and over. He was in a coma for 3 weeks while his family sat by his bed praying for him to wake up. The machines kept him breathing, but his brain was too damaged and eventually his body just gave out. Elliot pulled his phone back out and scrolled to a different page while I sat there trying to process what he'd just told me. He turned the screen toward me and showed me a memorial page that Matthew's family had set up on social media. There were photos of him in the hospital bed with tubes and machines all around him. His parents sat beside the bed holding his hands while monitors blinked in the background. One picture showed his mom touching his face while he lay there unconscious with bandages wrapped around his head. My stomach twisted up seeing how young he looked lying there helpless. The page had comments from family members praying for him and updates from his parents about his condition getting worse each day. I scrolled through more photos of him before everything happened, and he just looked like any other kid at our school. Elliot took his phone back and shoved it in his pocket while staring at the empty football field. He told me the worst part was that the guys who did it were never caught because nobody would say who they were. Everyone at the bus stop saw their faces, but they were all too scared to tell the cops anything. His brother knew exactly who they were, but wouldn't give names because the kiddie crew had already threatened anyone who might talk. The school tried to keep everything quiet and handle it internally without making a big deal that would scare parents. They didn't want news crews showing up or people pulling their kids out of school. I asked him why the school didn't just ban those specific shoes if they knew they caused problems. Elliot actually laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. He explained that if the school officially banned certain shoes, it would mean admitting they had a gang problem. That would hurt property values in the area and make the school look bad to the district. Parents would freak out and demand transfers to other schools. So instead, they just react badly when someone wears them and hope kids get the message without having to say it out loud. We sat there for a few more minutes before I had to head home. Walking down the sidewalk, I kept checking behind me because I felt like someone was watching. A car was driving really slow about half a block back, and my hands started shaking. The car sped up and pulled alongside me, and I was ready to run when I saw it was my mom. She rolled down the window and told me to get in because she'd been worried when I didn't answer my texts. Her face was tight with concern, and she kept glancing at me while she drove. She asked if everything was okay, but I just nodded because I didn't know where to start. When we got home, I went straight to my room and collapsed on my bed. My phone buzzed with an email notification from the school. It was this vague message about reminding students to follow the dress code and stay safe on campus. The email didn't mention shoes or gangs or anything specific, just generic stuff about appropriate attire and making good choices. I checked the parent Facebook group my mom was in, and it was going crazy. Parents were asking what the email meant and why it was sent out now. The comment section turned into a huge argument with some parents demanding answers and others saying people were overreacting. School officials kept posting these carefully worded responses that didn't actually say anything. My mom knocked on my door and came in holding her phone with the email pulled up. She wanted to know what was going on and why the school was sending this out. I tried to tell her it was nothing, but she wasn't buying it. We went back and forth with her getting more frustrated that I wouldn't tell her everything. Finally, I broke down and told her about Matthew and what happened to him last year. Her face went white, and she sat down hard on my bed. She remembered seeing something on the news about a student getting hurt, but she never connected it to my school. The news story had been vague too, and just said a teen was injured in an altercation. She grabbed my shoulders and made me promise to never wear those shoes again. I was brushing my teeth before bed when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Someone had sent me a photo of me from yesterday, walking into school with those shoes on. The message underneath said I got lucky and I better not push it. My hands were shaking as I tried to call the number back, but it just said the number was disconnected. I showed the text to my mom and she wanted to call the police, but I convinced her it would make things worse. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Elliot asking if I wanted to meet someone who knew Matthew really well. He said this person could help me understand why everyone was still so scared about the whole thing. I texted back yes, because I needed to know more about what I'd accidentally stepped into. At lunch, Elliot waved me over to a table in the corner where this tired-looking kid was sitting. He introduced me to Caden, who looked way older than a high schooler should look. Caden's about to drop some truth that'll make everyone wish they'd stuck with light-up sneakers instead. Nothing says fashion mistake quite like accidentally joining a gang through your shoe choices. Dark circles under his eyes made him look like he hadn't slept in days. Elliot explained that Caden had been Matthew's best friend and was supposed to be at the bus stop that day. Caden stared at his sandwich without eating, while he told me he'd gotten detention that day for being late to class. If he hadn't been in detention, he would have been standing right next to Matthew when it happened. The guilt was eating him up, and you could see it in how his shoulders slumped. He explained that the shoes had started out as just a cool local trend that kids were wearing. Some streetwear shop downtown had started selling them, and they got popular fast. Then the Kitty Crew decided to claim them as their symbol, and everything changed. Suddenly, wearing those shoes meant you were either in the gang or challenging them for territory. Most kids figured it out pretty quick and stopped wearing them, but Matthew had been out sick for a week when the word spread. He came back to the school not knowing anything had changed and wore his new shoes that he'd been excited about. Caden pulled out his phone and showed me the text messages from that day. Matthew had sent him a bunch of confused texts asking why everyone was acting so weird about his shoes. The messages started normal, but got more worried as the day went on. Caden had texted back telling him to just ignore it because he thought people were being dumb about nothing. His hands shook as he scrolled through the messages, and I could see the last one Matthew sent said he was waiting at the bus stop and some older kids were staring at him. Caden put his phone away and said if he'd just told Matthew to go home and change, maybe none of this would have happened. The guilt was eating him alive, and you could see it in how he kept rubbing his eyes. We sat there for a while longer before the bell rang for next period. I headed to my locker to grab my books and found a small cat paw sticker stuck right on the door. My stomach dropped because I knew this wasn't random. I peeled it off and went straight to the office to report it. The secretary took one look at the sticker and called the assistant principal out immediately. She took the sticker with a tissue like it was evidence and told me she'd handle it, but wouldn't say if it was a warning or a threat. Not knowing which one made it even worse because my mind kept going to the worst possibilities. The assistant principal kept the sticker and then suggested maybe I should eat lunch in the library for the next few days. She said it like it was just a suggestion, but her tone made it clear this was really an instruction. The school was trying to manage whatever was happening without actually admitting there was a problem. I nodded and left her office feeling more scared than before. After school, I met up with Elliot and Caden again because Elliot had an idea. He said we should make an anonymous post online explaining the shoe thing so other kids wouldn't make the same mistake. Every year, new students came to the school not knowing about these unwritten rules, and someone needed to warn them. Caden didn't want to do it at first because he was worried about the Kitty Crew finding out and coming after us. We went back and forth about it for a while with Elliot saying we had a responsibility to help, and Caden saying we needed to stay out of it. Finally, Caden agreed, but only if we kept Matthew's family completely out of it. He didn't want them seeing stuff online and having to relive the whole thing through social media. We spent the rest of the afternoon at Elliot's house carefully writing something that would explain the situation without making it sound exciting or cool. We had to rewrite it like 10 times to get the tone right. We wanted it to be informative but not sensational. We posted it on a throwaway account, and within an hour it had 50 shares. The next morning, my mom was waiting for me at breakfast with her serious face on. She'd been thinking about everything and decided she needed to meet with the school administration. I tried to talk her out of it, but she wasn't having it. She drove me to the school and marched straight into the office demanding a meeting. They made us wait for 20 minutes before the principal, assistant principal, and some district representative showed up. The meeting was exactly what you'd expect with lots of legal language about policies and procedures, but nothing actually helpful. They kept using phrases like maintaining a safe learning environment and following district protocols without ever saying what those actually meant. My mom pushed for specifics about the gang presence at the school, but they just deflected with statistics about how safe the school was overall. They showed her charts about test scores and graduation rates like that had anything to do with what we were talking about. When she asked directly about the Kitty Crew, they acted like they'd never heard of them. The meeting went on for 40 minutes, with everyone getting more frustrated. They assured my mom I was safe, but recommended I maintain a low profile for a while. My mom asked what that meant exactly, and they said I should avoid drawing attention to myself. She asked how long, and they said they'd reassess the situation as needed. The whole thing ended with nothing resolved and everyone angry. After the meeting, I was walking to class when Coach Wiley caught up with me in the hallway. He pulled me aside and apologized for everything that had happened to me. His voice got quiet when he started talking about Matthew being in his PE class. Matthew loved basketball and was actually pretty good at it. Coach's voice cracked when he mentioned how Matthew's usual spot in the gym stayed empty even now because nobody wanted to stand where he used to stand. He said Matthew was one of those kids who always tried hard even when he wasn't the best player. Coach looked like he hadn't slept well in a long time. That night, I was doing homework when my phone started blowing up with messages. Someone had spray-painted cat paws all over the Matthew Carney memorial plaque. People were posting pictures of it everywhere before the janitors could clean it up. The paint was bright red, and the paws were huge. By morning, the school had it cleaned, but everyone had seen the pictures. The message was pretty clear that the Kitty Crew hadn't forgotten and wouldn't let anyone else forget either. 2 days later, I got called to Emily Hong's office, along with Elliot and Caden. She was worried about all of us dealing with this trauma and wanted to make sure we had support. She gave us pamphlets about grief and fear and coping strategies. She said we could come talk to her anytime we needed to. During the session, Emily started talking about how she'd been trying to get the school to do something real about gang awareness for months now. She pulled out this thick folder full of proposals she'd written and rejection letters from the district office. Her hands shook a little as she showed us all the times they'd told her no, because they didn't want to admit there was a problem. She said every time she brought it up in staff meetings, the principal would change the subject or say they'd discuss it later, but later never came. Elliot asked her why she kept trying, and she said because kids like Matthew deserved better than pretending everything was fine. After we left her office, I couldn't stop thinking about the bus stop where Matthew got hurt, so I walked there after school. The place was just a regular bus stop with a metal bench and a faded schedule behind cracked plastic. Nothing about it looked dangerous or special. I sat on the bench trying to picture what happened, but it was just a normal street corner with cars going by and people walking their dogs. Caden found me there about 20 minutes later and sat down next to me without saying anything. We watched the buses come and go for a while. He pointed to a stain on the sidewalk that might have been anything, but we both knew what it probably was. That night, Elliot texted us the link to the anonymous post we'd written about the shoe thing. Within an hour, it had over 300 shares, and the comments were going crazy. Kids from other schools were adding their own warnings about colors and symbols to avoid in their neighborhoods. Some guy from across town said his cousin got jumped for wearing the wrong baseball cap. People were sharing stories about close calls and thanking us for the information. By morning, the post had been deleted from all the official school social media pages, but students kept screenshotting it and putting it back up on their personal accounts. The comment section turned into a war zone, with some people saying we were helping, and others saying we were making things worse by bringing up old wounds. One parent wrote that we were fear-mongering, while another said we might have saved their kid's life. The school sent out an email saying unauthorized posts about safety concerns should be reported to administration immediately. A group of parents screenshotted our post and used it to email the school board demanding a safety forum. They said if the school wouldn't educate kids about these dangers, then parents needed to know, so they could protect their children. The administration tried to ignore it at first, but more parents kept joining the email chain. After 3 days of nonstop emails and phone calls, they finally agreed to hold a forum, but made it clear it would be about general safety, not gang activity. They scheduled it for the following Thursday night in the gym. 2 days before the forum, I was walking past the memorial when I saw a woman standing there touching the plaque. She was crying really quietly and had flowers in her hand. When she turned around, I recognized her from the photos Elliot had shown me. It was Matthew's mom. She saw me, and her eyes went to my feet where I was wearing the borrowed gym shoes from Lost and Found. How did that sticker just appear on the locker door without anyone seeing who put it there? The way the assistant principal handled it like evidence makes me wonder if they've dealt with these cat paw warnings before. Her face got this look that made my chest hurt. She didn't say anything, but she reached out and touched my shoulder for a second before walking away. Thursday night, the gym was packed with parents and teachers and even some school board members. The principal started with a PowerPoint about general safety statistics and test scores like that mattered. Parents started getting mad, and one dad stood up and asked why his daughter knew more about staying safe from other kids than from the school. The principal kept trying to stick to his prepared speech, but people weren't having it. That's when Coach Wiley stood up from the back row. The whole room went quiet when he started talking about Matthew. He said Matthew was a good kid who died because adults were too scared to admit there was a gang problem. He talked about how Matthew loved basketball and helped younger kids with their homework and had his whole life ahead of him. His voice got rough when he said pretending problems don't exist doesn't make them go away. It just gets kids killed. After Coach sat down, it was like a dam broke. Mrs. Cook stood up and talked about how scared she was every day seeing kids wearing gang colors without knowing it. Another teacher said she'd been asking for gang awareness training for 3 years. Parents started sharing stories about their kids being threatened or followed home. The administration people looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. The assistant principal kept trying to redirect the conversation to their safety protocols, but nobody wanted to hear it. One mom said protocols don't help if kids don't know what to watch out for. The forum was supposed to end at 8, but it went until almost 10 with parents demanding real changes. The administration finally promised to review the dress code and improve safety communication. It wasn't much, but it was more than anyone expected from them. Outside the gym, parents were exchanging phone numbers and making group chats to share information since the school wouldn't. The next morning, there was a new email from the school with an updated dress code attached. They'd added a whole section banning specific shoe styles and color combinations. They didn't say why these items were banned, but everyone understood. The list was really detailed with pictures and everything. It felt like a small win, even though it came too late for Matthew. Monday morning, the assistant principal called me, Elliot and Caden into her office where Emily Hong was waiting with folders and notebooks spread across the table. She told us the administration wanted our help designing a peer education program about local safety issues, since we'd already shown we understood the problem. The program would have to stay within certain boundaries and couldn't mention gangs directly, but we could talk about general awareness and staying safe. We looked at each other and agreed because maybe we could help other kids avoid what happened to Matthew. They gave us a small budget and access to the computer lab after school to work on presentations and handouts. That night my mom was waiting when I got home, and she'd made hot chocolate, which meant we were going to have a serious talk. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked me to tell her everything about Matthew and the shoes and why nobody warned him. I explained what I'd learned from Elliot and Caden about how Matthew just liked the shoes and didn't know they meant anything dangerous. My mom's eyes got watery when I described the bus stop and how nobody helped because they were too scared. She held my hand and said, "Sometimes terrible things happen to good people for no fair reason, but we have to learn from it." We spent the next hour making our own family safety rules, like always checking in when I got places and having code words if I felt unsafe. The next few days, Caden started going to see the school therapist twice a week, and he told other kids it was actually helping him deal with everything. He put up flyers in the bathroom about informal support groups that would meet in the library during lunch for anyone dealing with fear or trauma from the Matthew situation. At first, only 3 kids showed up, but by the end of the week, there were 12 of us sitting in a circle, talking about how scared we still felt. 3 weeks after the whole shoe incident, I walked through the hallways without the security guard following me for the first time. Kids still remembered what happened, and some still looked at my feet when I passed, but the immediate tension had faded to background worry. I'd learned to read the unspoken rules now, like which colors to avoid, and which streets to take home, and which groups of kids to stay away from. Elliot texted me that his brother had finally agreed to talk to Emily Hong about what he saw at the bus stop when Matthew got jumped. His brother had been having nightmares for over a year and wouldn't talk to anyone, but Emily had a way of making people feel safe enough to share. The meeting lasted 2 hours, and afterwards Elliot said his brother seemed lighter somehow, like telling the truth had taken weight off his shoulders. Emily wrote everything down and said she'd pass it to the right people, though we all knew nothing would probably happen to the kids who hurt Matthew. During passing period, the tough sophomore who'd made the throat-slashing gesture at me on that first day walked up to my locker looking uncomfortable. He mumbled that he was sorry for scaring me and explained he was trying to warn me in his own way, not threaten me, because he didn't want to see another kid get hurt. The whole thing had been miscommunication built on everyone being too scared to actually talk about what the shoes meant. I told him it was okay, and we did this awkward handshake thing before he walked away, looking relieved. Every morning now, I stood in front of my closet and chose my shoes, carefully checking them against the mental list I'd built of what was safe and what wasn't. It wasn't about being scared anymore, but about being aware that symbols matter, and ignorance can be dangerous, and sometimes staying safe means paying attention to rules nobody writes down. Matthew didn't get that chance to learn because nobody told him, until it was too late. The last Friday of the month, Elliot, Caden, and I met at Matthew's memorial plaque after school when the hallways were empty. We stood there looking at his name and the dates that showed he was only 16 when he died, and we made a promise to keep his memory alive. We'd help other kids stay safe through our peer education program and our support groups, and just by being willing to talk about what everyone else wanted to forget. The school year would continue with its usual dramas and tests and dances, but we carried something heavier now, this hard-earned wisdom about how dangerous not knowing can be. We were survivors in a war we didn't choose to be part of, but at least we were looking out for each other now, which was more than Matthew had. Thanks for letting me wonder along with you today. Hopefully my questions added a little something extra to the experience. Until we meet again. Like the video, it helps more than you think.